Not sure what made me cry. Was it the music or the fact that I spent like 2 days looking for the right song and then decided to use the very first one that I had tried? In any case, let's talk about this. The SIRUI 50mm f1.8 Anamorphic lens. The squeeze factor is 1.33, which means after de-squeezing in post you get the 2.4 widescreen CinemaScope image. So you no longer have to put the cinematic bars on top of your footage, losing resolution in the process. And speaking of resolution, this is an APS-C lens, which means if you're using it on a full-frame camera like I do, you have three options. Either you scale it up in post, losing resolution, or you use the APS-C button on your camera. That way you punch in 1.5 times, which is the APS-C crop. Or what I prefer to do, you use the clear image zoom if you're on a Sony, and you punch in just 1.3 times. That way you get a bit of a wider angle. Build quality. The lens certainly doesn't feel cheap. It's a very sturdy lens, aluminum enclosure. I would even say it's a little bit too heavy for its size, weighing 560 grams or 1.23 pounds for those of you still using the medieval measurements. When it comes to image quality, I think SIRUI did an excellent job since the lens has a quite nice color rendition, perhaps leaning a bit towards the blue tones. Personally, I don't mind that. Also, the sharpness, from what I gather, anamorphic lenses are not that sharp usually. With this lens, however, it's pretty damn sharp even when wide open at f1.8. So again, good work, SIRUI. Flares. Let's talk about lens flares, since I believe that's the reason why a lot of people want to go into anamorphic, me excluding. Now, I have nothing against lens flares, it's just not the reason why I want to shoot anamorphic. But when it comes to this lens, I think they are actually very tasteful, not too intrusive, not too obvious, and you only see them when you point the light source directly at the camera, so it works fine with me. If I want to get that lens flare, I'm gonna go for it, but otherwise it doesn't bother me. The focus and aperture rings are smooth enough, yet they stay in their position once you move them, so you don't have to worry much about accidentally touching your lens and screwing up your settings. I already mentioned that if you want to get a little bit of a wider angle with this lens, you don't have to use the APS-C mode. Just punch in 1.3 times with the clear image zoom if you're on a Sony. But there's another trick you can do to get a little bit of a wider angle with this lens, and that's using an external adapter such as this one. Well, I got this one like 7 years ago from Amazon and it was 10 bucks. It says here, digital high definition 0.45 super wide angle lens with macro. If you use it like this, you get a wider angle, but if you remove this part, it serves as a macro lens. Well, it was 10 bucks, so you shouldn't expect much. You can certainly see how the sharpness falls off drastically as you move from the center of the image, and I feel like there's also a slight color shift. On the other hand, you could use this to your advantage. If you're after a super dreamy look, I think this might serve your purpose. Notice also what happens to the bokeh. The oval shape changes to weird kind of triangle or teardrop. Anyway, this is just the one I have, but I'm sure there are better ones out there on the internet, so do your own research. Another reason why you might want to use an adapter such as this is the minimum focal distance, which at 85 centimeters is really not that great. And that brings me to another point, which is something that I felt like I've been noticing, but it wasn't until I saw Tito Ferradans' review of the lens that I confirmed my assumptions. If you don't know this guy, go check out his channel. It's dedicated to anamorphic shooting and he really does know what he's talking about. So what he confirmed for me in his review is that with anamorphic lenses, it really is the case that at minimum focal distance, the squeeze ratio is a little bit different. With this lens particularly, it's 1.25 as opposed to 1.33 stated on the lens. Just something to keep in mind when shooting. Another thing I noticed with this lens is the stabilization. Now, I like to keep my gear to a minimum, and a lot of times that means the bare minimum, which means the camera and the lens. And I've been told before that I have a quite steady hand holding the camera. But with this lens, for some reason, the footage is very shaky. And I've been having this problem with the A7R2 and now with the A7S3, which I thought the active stabilization mode is gonna solve it, but it actually seems to make it worse, since there appears to be this warping in the corners going on. I mean, active stabilization is basically a software stabilization, so it's kind of like the warping that you get in stabilizing in post. What I'm trying to say is, even though your hands are steady, you might want to use some kind of rig, gimbal, or a tripod. I know this is kind of self-explanatory and obvious, but obviously I had trouble with it, so just felt like sharing my experience. So what is my overall opinion on the lens, and who is it for, or a better question, should you buy it? And the answer, of course, is it depends on your needs. If you are an indie filmmaker, content creator, or an anamorphic fanboy and you want to get into anamorphic shooting, I believe the answer is yes. Now, this was $600 when they first announced the campaign on Indiegogo. I know now it's a little bit pricier, but still an unbeatable price for an anamorphic lens. Before, you used to have to pay thousands of dollars just to shoot anamorphic, and now, thanks to SIRUI, we have the ability to shoot anamorphic on a budget. So thank you, SIRUI, for giving us the ability. And by the way, this is not sponsored by them in any way, but I really like the lens, and I know they released the 35 and the 24mm. I believe they're already working on something else, so looking forward to that. And yeah, that's it from me for today. If you like this video, stand on your left leg and jump 3 times. Thanks for watching.